It's time. I'm back.
Remember back in the 1990s, the last time period when the gaming industry felt truly innovative and people knew what to expect but didn't know how big the impact was going to be. After the 1980s showed game consoles does have a future, the question people had was, what's next? Clearly CDs had something. After it exploded onto the scene in the 1980s, thus putting vinyls out of commission, the next logical step was to try to store things on them, which in this case, gaming assets. It made perfect sense. Compact discs could store far more data than the preferred storage medium at the time, that being cartridges. Now, after some failures here and there with different consoles, Sony and Sega stepped up to the plate to show it was possible. The Sony PlayStation and Sega Saturn. But first, it was proven successful with home computers on CD-ROM, with, of course, a CD-ROM reader. When something changes the game, there are casualties along the way, which in this case were 2D platformers, point-and-clicks, amongst more. Of course, so they knew that this doesn't stick around, which in this case, the R-Race Adventure, which brings us to the topic of this video, Woodi for the PC, spelled with an I, because why not? This is part of a concept which was somewhat successful at the time. Back in the day, kids' TV was a good idea and morning shows was an option to gain interest. Here in Sweden, there was 2 kids' morning shows, Sofie Propp and Lattjo Lajban. Both had a game which is really cool to think about. During time of airing, kids could call into the show with their phone in hopes of being connected. And then they could play a very special game with the phone. A cool idea at the time and cool even to this very day. At some point, the game was released on PC, resulting in Rummel och Rabalder and Woodi. This one right here. The story is simple, but kinda tough to understand. For once, there's no dialogue. Things just happen as they go along. Secondly, just look at the graphics. It is a 3D rendered cutscene made at the time when it was still a cool concept. Of course, there was good-looking 3D cutscenes, but they had a very high budget and talent. While I think there was talent, I don't think the budget was there, or maybe not perfection. But it's easy to understand. Basically, this kid Woodi is carrying a black diamond to somewhere who knows where when it is snatched away by dinosaurs, splitting it into 3 pieces. Now it's up to Woodi to gather all 3 pieces to put it back together. So how do you turn this phone game concept into a PC game? Well, you take the symbols out and address phone keys to the arrow keys. As simple to understand as sliced bread, but does it mean the simplicity ruins it? Well, that all depends. The menu is simple, very simple. Changing the volume, learn the controls, finding value, things like that. But to be fair, you don't need to read up the rules to understand how it works. This is an on-race adventure, meaning you are always on the run, no way of slowing down. This is what the gameplay looks like. But if you are just traveling forward, then what's the point of playing? How do you make the gameplay of this interesting? Well, so this game consists of 3 levels, each level featuring different themes, changing up the visuals every once in a while. It is possible thanks to the way the graphics were designed. It is basically a 3D film, and this 3D rendition of Woodi is gliding on the background. Along the way, collecting things is the primary way to go for a high score, which is the point of the game. It was from TV. While it does seem kinda boring, I think there's some value to it, because if you are not careful, then crashing is the worst thing that could happen to you. Along the levels, there's a chance to pick up an extra mask, which will grant you an extra life. I was going to say to grab masks, but during capture of this footage, I only saw one, and it was kinda tough to grab, which is honestly the best way I can describe it. It's kinda tough if you're not prepared for it. You will be punished. Something else tough to grasp is how you cannot even pause the game. See, in games like this, you want to pause the game to really celebrate after beating a level and prepare for the next. Well, not in this game, because pushing that escape key, it just forces you back to the main menu, meaning you have to either die game over or beat it all in one setting. kind of a brain teaser, but you can get used to it. Of course, nowadays this is standard with online gaming, but back then it was a shake-up. Of course, I want to talk about something not usually talked about. Well, you see, before the age of mobile gaming being the way it is today, there was a push by game companies to give kids games a purpose. And there was no point. There was even the point of selling it to them. Thankfully, your mom and dad could happily let your kid play this game, for it teaches you 4 different things. How big the impact was going to be. After the 1980s showed game consoles does have a future. How is it even possible? So while Woodi is an interesting game to pick up and play, I wouldn't say it appeals to a big crowd. It is very simplistic, a bit too simplistic to some, and a bit too jarring to others. It does, however, have an audience, and that can be said about every game ever. Everyone is unique, that's what I'm saying.